What on earth have we just witnessed? Silverstone. My goodness me, he delivered on absolutely every single front. What a weekend of Formula One action we've seen. Possibly the greatest Grand Prix we're going to see of the 2022 season, in my opinion. It had a little bit of everything. And of course, we're going to delve into our 3 winners and 3 losers. But the first thing I do want to say is just thank you to Formula One for increasing the safety over the last few years. We had to take our hats off that Formula One is so much safer now than it has been in the past. And those safety precautions have saved lives. We saw Roy Nissany in the Formula 2. He was saved by the halo. That would have been a horrible crash in seasons gone by. And then obviously Albon, and in particular Joe in the Formula 1. The fact that both of them came out of those incidents completely unscathed. Joe in particular, the fact that he was back on the track before the end of the Grand Prix itself was just wonderful to see. I'm so glad that all of those drivers are safe and will be back in Formula 2 and in Formula 1 as soon as possible. But you just have to commend both Formula 1 and the stewards on the weekend. They did an incredible job. The safety has to come first in Formula 1, and it's lovely to see that we're seeing that progression in safety. Now let's delve into the video itself. And now my first winners of the Silverstone Grand Prix have to be the 2 number 2s at the top 2 teams right now. In particular, Carlos Sainz picking up his first victory in Formula 1 after 150 race starts. He finally got to step to the top of the podium. There's been incredible podium positions from him in the past, but he finally got that first victory. And I'll be honest, I was absolutely rooting for Carlos Sainz over the course of the weekend. You'll know that if you were on the live stream, I was wearing my Spanish top on Sunday. I was ready and raring to go after he picked up that first pole position on the Saturday as well. And you know, there'll be controversy behind it, whether or not he deserved that victory. Yes, he was clearly slower than Charles Leclerc over the course of the weekend, and he lost the position to Max Verstappen because of a mistake. But you know what? The Ocon safety car gave him the opportunity. He was tenacious. He stuck it out. He made sure he was there. And similar to what he did in 2021, he was there to pick up the pieces when other drivers made mistakes. He's done a little bit less of that in 2022, and that's why he is still 4th in the Drivers' Championship. But he's done so well over the Silverstone weekend. We have to give it to him. A well-deserved victory, and I'm so glad he finally got that first win. Now that actually puts him ahead of Charles Leclerc in terms of the average finishing positions in the races, with DNFs not included. And of course, that 150 race streak comes to an end. Although he didn't have to wait as long as Sergio Perez with a 190 race streak for the Mexican, who went on to be the number 2 on the podium over the course of the Silverstone Grand Prix weekend himself, and a well-deserved second place finish in the end. It was a very tricky Grand Prix for Sergio Perez. He had to really sieve his way through the field after a collision with Charles Leclerc, dropped him all the way to the back of the pack. Got a little bit lucky too, you could argue. Obviously, the safety car came just as he needed to change those tyres, so really did come at just the right time for him, and that managed to push him back into contention. And then, you know, from there, he had some incredible battles with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, all 3 of them swapping positions all of the time, and he was the one who managed to come out on top. And his wheel-to-wheel racing has really taken a step up, in my opinion, Sergio Perez, over the last few seasons. Maybe that's because the Red Bull just gives him that option to go for those braking points a little bit later, but I'm absolutely loving the battles that Sergio Perez is putting himself in, and a well-deserved winner from this Silverstone Grand Prix weekend. Which leads into my first losers of the Silverstone Grand Prix weekend quite nicely, in that it's the number 1s in the respective Ferrari and Red Bull teams. I'm going to talk Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen because I think both of them had a fairly disappointing Great British Grand Prix considering where they would have expected themselves to finish. In particular, Charles Leclerc probably walks away from this the most disappointed of the 2. He probably thought the victory was wrapped up, especially because he took the lead of the Grand Prix so late on. But again, it was Lewis Hamilton causing him problems. He cost them the victory in 2021. I'm going to argue that Lewis Hamilton cost Charles Leclerc the victory in 2022 as well, because Charles Leclerc drove incredibly well. He showed he had so much pace, was miles quicker than Carlos Sainz, even with a broken wing. And it's the team, again, that lets Charles Leclerc down. They were hesitant on the radio between him and Carlos Sainz. They gave Carlos Sainz lap times that he had to hit. He was never going to hit them. And whilst he was doing so, Lewis Hamilton was just reeling them in every single lap, putting in purple sectors and making sure that he basically caused them a headache. And when it did come to the pit stops with that safety car, that headache that Ferrari saw themselves in finally came to fruition, and Charles Leclerc didn't decide to pit because Hamilton had gained so much of an advantage over the Ferraris while they bickered. They couldn't actually double stack, so they decided to go with Carlos Sainz, making sure that Charles Leclerc kept track position, and unfortunately that was just the worst mistake that they could have made. The soft tyres were absolutely the best tyre to go onto for that final stint. We saw Lewis Hamilton Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez all managed to get past Charles Leclerc, and Charles Leclerc dropping out of the podium positions into 4th place. And he looked very, very frustrated at the end. Binotto stood by the team. They said that they did the right thing. But for me, again, it's Ferrari costing Charles Leclerc points. Whereas Max Verstappen and Red Bull, I think you could argue, got a little bit more unlucky in the end than making a mistake in particular. I know Max Verstappen took the lead of the Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz left the door open for the Dutchman. And it looked like he was going to go on to win. A little bit of redemption maybe from the 2021 race where he had the collision with Lewis Hamilton. But it just wasn't meant to be. Went over a curb a little bit too hard. Picked up some damage on his floor. And then looked like he was ice skating for the rest of it. Couldn't really get the temperature in those harder compound tyres either. And just didn't have the pace to catch up to the rest of the pack with so much damage to that Red Bull car. Damage limitations in the end, finishing up in 7th place. I know that he was incredibly frustrated, and it shows, you know, every single time Max Verstappen isn't in the lead of a Grand Prix, he's always going to be on the radio asking what he can do, asking the Red Bull team what they can do to make his race better. But in the end, 6 points, not too bad considering. And he'll move into Austria. Obviously, the Red Bull Ring is next up, and I'm sure he will absolutely smash it out of the park once we get there. But 6 points, not too bad. And from 6 points to 6th place in the Drivers' Championship, we have my second winner from the Silverstone Grand Prix weekend. It has to be Lewis Hamilton. Again, just looked reinvigorated here in Silverstone. After Canada, thought he had a little bit of a spring in his step, and now he's got back-to-back podiums. 3rd place in Canada, 3rd place here in Silverstone. He finally looks fully reinvigorated for this 2022 season. And I feel like Lewis Hamilton and Silverstone are just so synonymous with each other. Obviously picked up that record-breaking 13th podium. And last year it was the spark that really got that battle going between him and Max Verstappen. It was the ignition, the turning point for Lewis Hamilton in that 2021 season. And I genuinely think Silverstone might be the turning point for him again in this 2022 season. It felt like we finally got to see that wheel-to-wheel Lewis Hamilton. The Lewis Hamilton who likes to put other drivers under pressure. He was putting those fastest laps in behind the Ferraris when he got that opportunity under the safety car. We saw him going wheel-to-wheel with Charles Leclerc, with Sergio Perez, trying his absolute best to get up into that second place slot. And you know what? If the safety car hadn't have come out, maybe he would have been able to pressure the Ferraris, possibly gone on to win here in Silverstone. But now he and George Russell are on exactly the same average qualifying positions over the course of the season so far. And he's still 18 points behind George Russell. But I think it gets a little bit interesting to see how that develops over the next few races. George Russell losing his top 5 streak. As I said, Hamilton with back-to-back podiums. The momentum seems to be with the 7-time world champion. Whereas the momentum has been well and truly lost by our next losers in AlphaTauri. Another weekend without points for the sister Red Bull team. And it looked like the season was finally going to pick up, you know. It looked like after Baku in particular, Pierre Gasly had his best finish. Yuki Tsunoda only dropped out of the points because of a rear wing issue that wasn't his fault. But in Silverstone, they only had themselves to blame. Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly were running 8th and 7th in the race. It looked like they were going to both go on to pick up some points. And then Yuki Tsunoda decides to dive up the inside of his teammate, loses the rear end of the car, ends up spinning into Pierre Gasly, knocking both of them out of the points. And then in particular, Pierre Gasly then picked up an orange and black flag and had to retire from the Grand Prix. Yuki Tsunoda ended up finishing 14th, last of the finishers in this one. And it's the worst thing that you can do in Formula One. You know, Yuki Tsunoda was very, very apologetic. Pierre Gasly was seemingly very, very angry at the Japanese driver. And we know that they have a really good relationship with each other. That's definitely going to have taken a battering after Silverstone. And the team themselves are going to be gutted. It looked like they maybe could start to build momentum towards the Alfa Romeos, but instead they actually lost ground to the team that are our next winners, which has to be Haas, as they took their opportunity and grabbed it with both hands. Both drivers finishing in the points for the first time this season. And we have to remember that this is a team that hadn't finished in the points in 6 races now. They dropped behind Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship after Canada, and it was looking a little bit down for the Haas team. But now, both drivers in the points and a massive weekend to celebrate for the American team. Mick Schumacher picking up an 8th place finish, Kevin Magnussen in 10th place. That puts Mick Schumacher on 4 points in 17th place in the Drivers' Championship, bumps him up above Stroll, above Latifi, above Albon as well, and also puts Kevin Magnussen on equal pegging with Pierre Gasly, who dropped out of the points as we touched on. And the fact that both of them got a little bit of a bump in the Drivers' Championship, the fact that they're now above Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship as well, we have to praise the team. And in particular, we have to praise Mick Schumacher, because he was under a lot of pressure. Let's not get it wrong. He was under so much pressure to deliver, especially since Monaco, in my opinion. That's when I made my video about his Formula One future and what he really needed to do. And he's done it absolutely sensationally well. In Baku, he drove a really clean race. Yes, it wasn't quick, but it was clean. And he just needed those laps and to build up a little bit of confidence. Then in Canada, he got even more confidence behind him. He obviously got into Q3, qualified exceptionally well. And it was only a mechanical failure that stopped him picking up the points in Canada. And now in Silverstone, actually qualified really poorly, did Mick Schumacher. Did so well to get past so many drivers and even had a little bit of a battle with Max Verstappen towards the end of the Grand Prix. Might have even snuck in front of the world champion, and that would have been something spectacular, but didn't manage to do so. An 8th place finish and 4 points for Mick Schumacher, and I'm very, very happy for him. Whereas my final loser in Valtteri Bottas definitely did not have a Grand Prix worth writing home about. He was pretty drab over the entire weekend at Silverstone. And I was going to say Alfa Romeo, but you can't really say Joe, because Joe actually was having a very, very good weekend before the crash. Got himself into Q3 and looked like he might have picked up points again, the Chinese driver. Whereas Valtteri Bottas seems to have stalled slightly. You know, he hasn't qualified in Q3 since Spain now and has been beaten in the last 3 qualifying sessions by his rookie teammate. Not only that, but he was stuck behind Nicholas Latifi, who kind of goes down as an honorary winner because he got into Q3 but didn't pick up points, so I didn't want to talk about him today. But on pace, Valtteri Bottas was stuck behind Nicholas Latifi. He had DRS lap after lap after lap and still couldn't get by the Canadian. And I think when you can't get past Nicholas Latifi, something's not quite going your way if you're Valtteri Bottas, because he was in a much, much slower Williams car. And I worry that if Valtteri Bottas loses a little bit of momentum, it might be really tough for Alfa Romeo, because they've got the reliability issues as well, that they'll drop further and further and further behind Alpine, and the battle for 4th will really just come down to McLaren versus Alpine, whereas Alfa Romeo will kind of be stuck in this 6th place limbo. But with all that being said, they're just my winners and losers from the British Grand Prix weekend. I'm sure you've got different ones in your mind, so let me know those in the comments down below. Who are your winners and losers? As always, if you got to this point in the video, leave pineapple in your comments so I know that you watched all the way to the end. Leave a like, subscribe if you are new, and I will see you next time.